She gets left with her son on Christmas Eve, and her billionaire boss whispers, "Pretend I'm your family." On Christmas Eve, she was supposed to become a wife. Instead, she was left alone, with her 5-year-old son, a suitcase, and nowhere to go. The snow kept falling, streets emptied, and the silence hurt more than the betrayal. Then her billionaire boss appeared, not as the powerful CEO everyone feared, but as a man who saw her breaking and chose to stay. What began as a simple lie to survive the holiday turned into shared dinners, quiet laughter, and a bond no one expected, especially the child who slowly reached for his hand. But secrets never stay hidden forever, and when the truth comes out, she must decide, was this only a Christmas miracle, or the family she never believed she could have again? Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. "You can't stay here, June. He said you had until tonight." The words landed like cold snow against her skin, soft at first, then melting into a sting. June Callahan stood in the softly lit lobby of the Hawthorne Financial Building, holding her son's small mittened hand. With a single suitcase at her side and shame blooming across her face like frost on glass. The receptionist, a young woman who couldn't meet her eyes, shifted uncomfortably behind the marble desk. "I'm so sorry. I know this isn't fair, especially on Christmas Eve, but..." It was very clear. June nodded once. Not trusting her voice, she didn't beg. She never begged. Behind her, the glass doors revealed a world turning white. Snow fell in lazy spirals. Taxis were scarce, shops closed early, and the city, usually alive with Christmas, felt strangely hollow. Her fingers tightened gently around Finn's, and he looked up at her with those quiet blue-gray eyes that always saw too much. She bent down slowly, brushing snow from the shoulders of his little coat. "Do you remember what we talked about?" she asked, her voice like velvet under strain. "The plan?" He nodded solemnly, resting his forehead against hers. "We find a safe place, then we open the gingerbread from Miss Ellie's bag." June smiled, though her throat burned. Miss Ellie, her elderly neighbor, had slipped a small wrapped cookie into Finn's backpack before they left. At the time, it had been sweet. Now it felt like an anchor in a storm. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. Her ex-fiancé, had left that morning with a note and nothing else. "I'm not ready. Don't wait. I'm sorry." The apartment lease was in his name. The wedding fund had been quietly drained. And while June had kept her dignity in the hours since, right now in this empty lobby with a child, a suitcase, and nowhere to sleep, she felt the ground give way beneath her. "June?" The voice, low, steady, came from behind her. She turned slowly. Edward Hawthorne, her boss. The elusive, untouchable CEO of Hawthorne Financial. The man who rarely made appearances in this building unless it was urgent or strategic. Yet here he was, coat draped over one arm, tie undone, and a look in his eyes she couldn't quite read. She straightened instinctively. "Mr. Hawthorne, I was just leaving." His eyes dropped to the suitcase, then to Finn, who stared up at him with quiet curiosity. Edward's voice softened barely above a whisper. "Where are you going?" She hesitated. "Somewhere warm." He studied her, not in the cold, calculating way she was used to from him in boardrooms. This look was different, warmer, personal. Then, so softly she almost didn't catch it, he said, "Pretend I'm your family, just for tonight." Silence. June blinked. The word sounded ridiculous, sounded impossible, and yet he wasn't joking. He wasn't smiling either. His voice carried weight, purpose. I can't," she stammered. "I mean, I don't want to impose. You must have your own family plans, and..." "I don't," he interrupted gently. "Not anymore." Another beat of silence. Then, without waiting for permission, he reached for the suitcase. Finn let go of June's hand and moved instinctively closer to Edward, his small frame brushing against the man's long overcoat. Edward glanced down at him. "How old are you, soldier?" Finn looked up. 5 1/4. Serious age," Edward said, nodding solemnly. "You eat spaghetti?" Finn blinked, then gave a tiny nod. "With cheese." Edward turned back to June. "Then let's start with dinner." The penthouse was quiet, bathed in soft amber light, and the distant sound of a jazz record playing low in the background. Finn tiptoed around the living room, wide-eyed at the fireplace, the oversized leather chairs, and the twinkling city lights beyond the window. June stood near the kitchen island, holding a warm mug between both hands. She didn't drink coffee at night, but she wasn't going to refuse anything right now, especially not after what he'd done. "I don't know what to say," she said quietly. "Then don't," Edward replied. He was at the stove, yes, the actual stove, heating up something that smelled suspiciously like homemade sauce. "You cook?" she asked, a little surprised. He shrugged. "A little. My grandmother taught me. She used to say a man who can't make a proper sauce doesn't deserve to eat one." June smiled. And just for a second something light passed between them. A moment. He served the pasta in 2 large bowls and 1 small. Finn clambered up onto a high stool, his eyes shining at the grated cheese that Edward sprinkled with theatrical flair. "Like snow," he whispered. June bit back the tightness in her throat. It wasn't just the food, it was the normalcy, the kindness, the way Edward asked Finn if he liked Christmas music and let him pick a song, the way he didn't ask intrusive questions or press her for details. He simply offered shelter, with dignity. Over dinner, the quiet settled into comfort. Finn eventually grew sleepy. Curling up on the massive sofa, clutching his backpack like a pillow, Edward covered him gently with a soft throw blanket. "I should go," June said, rising. "You've already done too much." Edward looked at her. "Go where?" She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes drifted to a photo frame on the mantel, a black and white portrait of a woman. Elegant, smiling, a resemblance to Edward in her cheekbones. "Your grandmother?" she asked. He nodded. "She raised me." "She looks like someone who told the truth even when it hurt." He gave a soft chuckle. "She did, especially then." Their eyes met again. Something raw flickered between them. Not romance yet, but recognition. 2 people who'd been left in different ways, carrying pieces of themselves quietly. Then the doorbell rang, once, twice. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Edward's face changed instantly, sharp and unreadable. He stood motioning her to stay back and opened the door with a cautious calm. Outside stood Vivian Ashford, tall, elegant, and cold as the December wind. In a dark designer coat and red lipstick, she looked like a winter storm in heels. "I figured you'd be here," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes landed on June immediately, narrowing with interest. "Well, isn't this domestic?" June straightened. Vivian's gaze slid to the sleeping child on the couch, then back to Edward, with razor-sharp precision. "Care to explain what I just walked into? Or are we all pretending tonight?" The silence that followed was loud, too loud. And June, who had been surviving on quiet strength all day, suddenly felt the first crack splinter down her spine. Vivian took a slow step forward, voice velvet-edged with poison. "Does the board know you're playing house with your assistant and her child, Edward?" Edward didn't flinch, but June's heart dropped. Not because of the words, but because she suddenly realized this woman wasn't just his ex. She was the board's chair. Vivian's perfume hit first, sharp, expensive, a touch too deliberate. She stood in the center of Edward Hawthorne's penthouse, perfectly composed like a woman who'd spent years mastering how to wound someone with a smile. Her gaze slid over June's coat, still damp from the snow, and landed once more on Finn, asleep on the couch under Edward's blanket. I didn't realize you'd replaced me with a ready-made family, she said silkily. June opened her mouth to respond, to deny whatever this was, but Edward spoke first. She's not a replacement, he said, voice low and firm. Vivian's red lips curved. Interesting choice of words. June stepped forward slightly. I think I should go. Edward's eyes snapped to hers. You're not going anywhere. Vivian arched an eyebrow. How chivalrous. Is that what we're doing now, playing hero to the help? The word hit like a slap, and June felt it, not just in herself, but in the quiet, breathless tension that filled the room. A single glance at Edward told her he'd felt it too. You've said what you came to say, he told Vivian, moving between them. Now, go. But Vivian didn't move. Instead, her eyes narrowed, voice quiet and deliberate. The board is going to eat this alive. Edward, you, bringing your assistant into your home, letting her child sleep on your sofa. Tell me, how many policies does that violate? She turned to June, cool and poised. And you, how clever. From broken engagement to billionaire sympathy in a single day. Do you always land on your feet this well? June's cheeks flushed. But before she could respond, Finn stirred behind her, small, half asleep. Mama. His voice was soft, confused. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. June turned instantly, kneeling. Shh, baby, it's okay. Finn blinked, looking between the adults. He noticed Vivian last, and stared, his small hand clutching his toy tighter. Vivian's voice lost a degree of sharpness. You have a sweet boy. The compliment felt like a dagger wrapped in velvet. Edward stepped forward, tone like steel. Leave, now. Vivian held his gaze for a long beat, then gave the smallest smile. Well, Merry Christmas, Edward. She turned and walked out. The door clicking shut behind her with finality. The silence she left behind lingered like a bruise. June exhaled slowly, her body still tense. Finn leaned against her leg, quietly watching Edward. She's someone important to you, June said softly. She was, he replied, his voice unreadable. June searched his face. But whatever had flickered there earlier, that moment of gentle warmth, of shared understanding, was gone. Now he was back to being the man from the office, reserved, distant. I should still go, she said again, standing slowly. This was already crossing a line, and now Edward didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood there, his back to her. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. She used to be different. Before the boardroom, before the image. We built this company together. He turned back around, eyes tired now. Then I started caring more about people than numbers. And she couldn't forgive that. June held his gaze. I'm not here to cause trouble, Edward. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the mask dropped. I know you're not. He walked toward Finn, who still stood silently by June's side. He crouched to eye level. Hey, he said gently. Sorry about the loud lady, she won't be back. Finn looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Later, after Finn was tucked onto the pull-out sofa in the guest room with a second blanket and his favorite toy beside him, June stepped onto the balcony. The snow had stopped. The city stretched out before her, lit. Still and beautiful in a way only winter nights could be. Edward joined her without a word, holding out a steaming mug. Chamomile, he said. From the emergency stash, you looked like you needed something warm. June accepted it, letting the heat soak into her hands. You didn't have to defend me back there. I didn't defend you, he replied, looking out at the skyline. I defended what was right. The silence settled again, softer this time. She thinks this was a move, she said, like I planned it. I know. June hesitated. It wasn't. I know that too. She looked down into her mug, struggling to keep her voice even. I was supposed to have a family today. A home, A dinner where someone saved the biggest piece of pie for Finn because he always eats the crust first. She smiled a little, sadly. Instead, I got a note and a suitcase. Edward was quiet. Then, after a moment, I was supposed to propose 5 years ago. She looked at him, surprised. He shrugged one shoulder. I had the ring, the reservation, everything. But something didn't feel right, so I waited. And then, I never proposed. They stood there, two strangers connected by losses they hadn't spoken aloud until tonight. After a moment, June looked down at her scarf, pale wool, frayed a little near the edge, and reached up to tuck it tighter. That's when Edward noticed it. The scarf lay folded nearby. She'd worn it every day since she started at the company, even in spring. He'd seen it in elevators, in lunch breaks, in quiet moments when she wrapped it around her shoulders as if holding herself together. It was my mother's, she said, noticing his gaze. She gave it to me before we lost her. His voice was quiet. It suits you. She smiled faintly. She'd say it makes me look like a librarian lost in the wrong century. Edward chuckled softly. It was the first real laugh of the night, small but honest, a breather. Like warm light through a cracked window. The air between them shifted again, not romantic, not quite, but something tender, unspoken, a closeness neither of them had asked for or were entirely ready for. June stepped back inside. We'll be out of your way by morning. Edward didn't follow her. He just watched the snow fall again, thin and silent, and whispered to the night, I hope not. But at that exact moment, in a different part of the city, Vivian Ashford was dialing a number. The screen lit up. Board liaison. Private. She smiled, voice low and full of triumph. We have a situation. June didn't sleep. Not really. She lay on the edge of the guest bed, fully dressed. Scarf still wrapped around her like armor. Finn was curled beside her, breathing soft and steady, one small hand tucked under his cheek. The room was dimly lit by the soft blue glow of a nightlight someone had plugged in. Maybe Edward, maybe already there. She couldn't tell anymore what was intentional and what was just kindness disguised as habit. Outside, the snow had started again, lighter this time, just a whisper of white against the glass. June stared at the ceiling. The silence was heavier now, not cruel, but unfamiliar. She had grown used to chaos, not the loud kind, but the quiet unraveling that came with small disappointments stacking on top of each other. A missed call, a shrinking bank account, a partner who started coming home late and stopped asking how her day had been. And then Christmas Eve had arrived, and with it, the truth. She glanced over at Finn. He didn't cry when they left, not once, just held her hand, zipped up his jacket like a soldier, and followed her into the cold. By morning, the scent of coffee pulled her out of sleep. Real coffee and eggs. Her stomach clenched with both hunger and guilt. She padded out of the guest room quietly, careful not to wake Finn, and followed the sound into the kitchen. Edward was at the stove again, sleeves rolled up, barefoot. He didn't look like a billionaire right now. He looked like a man who knew how to flip an omelet without breaking it, and how to brew the good coffee, not the cheap office kind that came in industrial tubs. He looked up. Morning, June blinked. You're cooking again? He gave a small shrug. Couldn't sleep. Her voice was soft. Me neither. He slid a plate onto the counter. Eggs, toast, fruit. Nothing extravagant, but plated with quiet care. She hesitated. I didn't come here to take your food, Edward. You didn't come here at all, he said simply. I invited you. That matters. She bit her lip. The hunger was real, and the toast smelled like cinnamon. Thank you, she said finally, and sat. They ate mostly in silence, but not the uncomfortable kind. Finn wandered in a few minutes later, hair wild, dragging his small backpack behind him like a blanket. Edward greeted him like they were old friends. Want hot chocolate or apple juice? Both, Finn said, dead serious. Edward smirked. Strong choice. It was a micro-victory, a laugh soft and brief, but it cracked something open. June watched her son take a sip of chocolate, milk mustache forming, and felt something dangerous rise in her chest. Hope, that quiet, terrifying thing. Later that morning, Edward leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her pack the suitcase again. You don't have to leave today. June zipped the bag with deliberate care. I can't stay either, not like this. He didn't argue, but he didn't step aside. I have a guest house, he said slowly. Empty, private, safe. You and Finn can stay there through the holidays, longer if you need, rent-free. June stared at him. Edward, that's a boundary, he interrupted. Not charity. You need space. And I need to do the right thing before the wrong people twist this into something it's not. She exhaled. Hi, Vivian, he nodded. She's already called the board liaison. Her stomach sank. She's going to make it sound like, I know exactly how she'll spin it, which is why we do this cleanly, transparently. You stay in the guest house, I cover expenses. You're on extended leave, paid. You get back on your feet, and we both keep our dignity intact. It was too much, but it was also exactly what she needed, and he knew it. I need a few conditions, she said carefully. He nodded once. Of course. 1, no gifts for Finn without asking me. 2, no public appearances. I don't want pictures or rumors. And 3, he asked. A small lift in his brow. She hesitated. Don't be kind to me if you don't mean it. I can't afford to mistake this for anything it's not. Something flickered across his face. A pause. A decision. I mean it, he said. All of it. The guest house was tucked behind the main estate. Warm, sunlit, and quiet. Not extravagant. Lived in, clean but cozy. There was a fireplace, 2 bedrooms, and a kitchen stocked with basics. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated in gold and copper. Not elegant, but personal. There were handmade ornaments. Some old, some clearly crafted by a child years ago. Edward saw her looking and smiled faintly. My grandmother put that up every year, even after she lost her sight. June touched one of the wooden stars gently. She must have loved you a lot. He didn't answer, but the silence said enough. That night, Edward brought over a slow-cooked stew and a fresh loaf of bread. He didn't stay long. Just dropped it off, checked on the heating, and handed Finn a small box wrapped in newspaper. What's this? June asked cautiously. Edward held up his hands. Not a gift, just something from my own childhood. Finn unwrapped it slowly, revealing a wooden toy soldier, slightly chipped but beautifully made. This was mine when I was your age, Edward said softly. He's good company, especially when you feel a little braver than you really are. Finn held it like treasure. June stood, unsure what to say. Why are you doing all this? She asked finally. Edward looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, because I remember what it's like to be left behind on Christmas. Meanwhile, across town, Vivian stood in a sleek boardroom, sliding a folder across the table. Photos, screen grabs, timestamps. Edward's decision-making is compromised, she said coolly. He's bringing emotional entanglements into our executive ecosystem. We need a formal review, the chairman frowned. Do you have proof? Vivian smiled, sharp and cold. Soon. 3 days passed like quiet echoes, not loud but steady. June found herself slipping into something she hadn't felt in years. A rhythm, not quite a routine, but close enough to make her heart ache with both gratitude and guilt. Every morning, Edward brought a small parcel to the guest house. Sometimes breakfast, flaky pastries from a bakery that had clearly sold out before 7 a.m. Sometimes a book for Finn, wrapped in brown paper and string. Sometimes nothing but a knock and a quiet. You good? He never stayed long, never pushed. never crossed the invisible line she'd drawn. But each time he came, Finn lit up, and June tried not to. On the fourth morning, she found herself standing in the small kitchen, folding laundry while the kettle hissed behind her. Her scarf, the symbolic object her mother's scarf, was draped over the chair. Freshly washed, still faintly smelling of cedar and lavender. Finn was in the next room, drawing pictures of Mr. Edwards' big car and the brave toy soldier guarding the sofa. A knock came. 3 soft taps. June opened the door to find Edward holding 2 cups of coffee and what looked like a folded newspaper. He glanced at her, then down at his own shoes. "There's something I need to show you." The article was on page 6. Rumors swirl around Hawthorne CEO after holiday guesthouse sightings. Beneath the headline was a blurry photo. Edward, in his long overcoat, stepping onto the guesthouse porch. June was just visible through the window, holding Finn in her arms. Her stomach dropped. She read the first paragraph 3 times before she could make sense of the words. Impropriety, influence, quiet scandal, emotional instability. The last line made her fingers tremble. Sources close to the board suggest an emergency vote may be called in early January to assess Hawthorne's capacity for leadership. She looked up at Edward, breath shallow. "You said no one would know." "I said we'd do it cleanly," he replied, jaw tight. "But Vivian's faster than I thought." She felt the guilt rising fast, hot and shameful. "This is my fault." "No," he said firmly. "This is mine." But June wasn't listening. She was already picturing it. The whispered comments in the break room, the emails forwarded accidentally, the looks. Her name would be a punchline. Again. "I'll leave tonight," she said quickly. "We'll find something else. I shouldn't have stayed this long." "Stop," Edward said, not loud but with weight. "You didn't do anything wrong." She folded her arms. "It's defensive. Neither did you, but that won't stop them, will it?" He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Perception mattered. That night, June made a humble meal, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Comfort food, plain and quiet. Finn called it a Christmas dinner with melted treasure. As they ate, June tried not to let Finn see her anxiety, but he saw everything. "Mama, are we going to leave Mr. Edwards' house soon?" he asked softly. June paused. "Maybe, sweetheart." "Did we do something bad?" She almost broke. "No," she whispered, "not even close." Later, after Finn fell asleep with the toy soldier clutched to his chest, June stepped out onto the porch. The snow had returned, feather-light and glowing beneath the porch light. Edward was already there, hands in his coat pockets, looking out at the city. "I should have protected you better," he said without turning. "You did more than anyone ever has." He looked at her then, looked at, eyes tired but warm. "I can't stop them from talking, but I can make a statement, something that tells the truth, not the story they're trying to sell." June shook her head. "Anything you say will only fuel it. They'll twist it." He hesitated. "What if I told them the truth?" She frowned. "What truth?" "That I admire you," he said simply. "That you're raising a remarkable child. That you were abandoned, and I offered shelter. That none of this is inappropriate. It's human." She stared at him. "You'd say all that to the board?" He nodded once. "Publicly, if I have to." Her voice dropped. "And if they push you out, I'll walk with my dignity intact." "But they won't." She shook her head. "Why would you risk everything for us?" Edward stepped forward, close enough now that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the tired lines at the corners of his eyes. "Because I've spent a lifetime surrounded by power and cold rooms and people who only know how to calculate worth in dollars. And then you walked into my building with grace and sorrow, and didn't ask for anything, even when you had every right to. Because I know what loneliness feels like at Christmas, and because your son trusted me with a toy soldier, like it was a sacred thing. June swallowed hard. He added, more quietly, "Because I don't want to spend another year wishing I'd done something instead of letting fear keep me quiet." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached up slowly and without thinking and adjusted his scarf. It had come loose in the wind. Her fingers brushed the side of his jaw, a tiny moment. Nothing spoken, but the silence was warm now. Something shifted, not just between them, but within them. The next morning, before sunrise, Edward received a sealed envelope slipped under his office door. No signature, just a single printed sentence. "Your assistant isn't who you think she is." Edward stared at the envelope in his hands for a long time. It was thin, plain. No handwriting, no seal, just one printed line inside. "Your assistant isn't who you think she is." He read it 3 times. The font was a standard serif, the kind found in office printers. No signature, no evidence, just accusation. He didn't like games. He liked facts. Integrity. Truth that could be spoken plainly. And this? This felt like someone trying to stir the water just enough to muddy it. By the time he arrived at the guest house that morning, the snow had stopped. Sunlight bounced off the frost-covered windows, giving everything a strange glow, quiet but bright. He knocked twice. June opened the door in a soft beige sweater and slippers. Her long hair was loose, still damp from a morning shower, and she looked like she hadn't slept again. "Morning," she said gently, stepping aside. Finn was at the kitchen table, carefully arranging blueberries on a slice of toast like they were soldiers in formation. Edward smiled faintly at the sight. "Strategic planning?" Finn didn't look up. "Battle breakfast." June offered Edward a mug of coffee. "Black, right? No sugar?" He nodded. "You remembered." Her voice was quiet. "I remember more than I wish I did." He didn't press her on it, not yet. Instead, he set the envelope on the counter. She noticed immediately. "What's that?" He slid it toward her. "Someone thinks you're hiding something." She didn't touch it, didn't even flinch. But her lips parted slightly, and something in her expression, something so subtle, changed. "Are you?" he asked softly. June looked down. "Do you want the long version or the short one?" "Long," he said without hesitation. She glanced at Finn, who was now humming to himself, toast half-eaten, jam on his cheek. "Let's take a walk," she said. They walked in the pale light of mid-morning, boots crunching softly over frozen grass behind the estate. "I changed my last name 3 years ago," she said. "Legally." Edward stayed quiet, letting her lead the rhythm of the conversation. "My maiden name was June Atwell. You probably don't remember the scandal. It was buried under corporate takeovers and bigger headlines. But my father was a hedge fund manager who got caught. Embezzlement, insider trading, the whole works." Edward's brow furrowed slightly. "Atwell, I remember the name now," she nodded. "I was 25. Finn had just turned 2. My mother passed a month after the trial began. Heart condition, they said. I think it was grief." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "So, yes, someone digging hard enough would find that I used to be June Atwell. And they'd use it to paint me however they want." Edward studied her. "But you changed it." "Because I wanted a clean start, for Finn, for me." Her voice caught slightly. "I got an admin job under a false name because no one would hire me as Atwell's daughter. And then, 2 years later, Hawthorne Financial promoted me. You never asked about my past, and I never offered." She looked at him, searching his eyes. "I've never lied to you, but I have lived quietly, carefully. I didn't want my son to grow up as someone else's headline." Edward's jaw flexed, but not with anger, with something else, respect. Back at the guest house, Finn was curled up on the sofa reading a picture book when they returned. Edward turned to June at the door. "Thank you for telling me." "I didn't want to," she admitted, "but I don't want to hide any more either." He nodded once, Then, "Let me handle whoever sent that letter." June raised an eyebrow. "Oh, handle?" He smiled, that rare sharp smile that never made it into the press photos. "Legally, swiftly, quietly." That afternoon, a small miracle happened. Finn convinced Edward to help him build a pillow fort in the corner of the guest house. Edward didn't exactly know what he was doing. He was clearly more used to spreadsheets than couch cushions, but he followed Finn's serious instructions with quiet dedication. June watched from the kitchen as Edward tried and failed to balance a cushion wall. Finn whispered something, and Edward grinned, placing a stuffed penguin on the top like a crown. "Is this a castle?" Edward asked. "No," Finn said seriously. "It's a headquarters. Soldiers need one." Edward glanced toward June. "I've been promoted, apparently." "To what?" she called. Finn looked over his shoulder. "He's Commander Hawthorne now." They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like they were just three people on a snowed-in holiday, not a scandal waiting to happen. That night, Edward lingered on the porch. "I meant what I said before," he told her quietly. "I don't want you to leave." June held his gaze. "I'm still leaving eventually," he nodded slowly. "But maybe not yet." She didn't answer, but she didn't close the door on him either. Across town, Vivian stood in front of a crackling fireplace, phone to her ear. A voice on the line said calmly, "We have confirmation." "Her past is real," Vivian smiled coldly. "Then, let's give the board a name. June Atwell." The email came early, too early. June saw the subject line first, "Urgent, formal board review," and her breath caught. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. "A special session has been called regarding Mr. Edward Hawthorne's conduct and possible misuse of executive authority. Your name will come up. I suggest you prepare." No signature, just the weight of it, heavy and immediate. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from. Her mother's scarf was folded neatly beside her. She hadn't worn it in 2 days. Somehow it felt like tempting fate. Finn was still asleep. The pillow fort remained intact, a little crooked now. The stuffed penguin toppled sideways. It felt like a metaphor, a quiet empire on the verge of collapse. Edward arrived an hour later. He looked calm, too calm. Suit impeccable, eyes clear, expression unreadable. "Got it too?" he asked, glancing at the screen still open on her phone. June nodded. "They're going to drag me through this." He pulled out a chair, sat beside her. "Not if I stand first." She looked at him. "They'll question everything. Your judgment. Your leadership. Why you let the daughter of a disgraced financier into your company, into your home." He reached across the table, his hand resting briefly over hers. "I hired a woman who worked twice as hard as anyone in her department. I promoted her when no one else saw her because she never asked to be seen, just to be valued." "That's what I'll tell them." Her voice cracked. "It won't be enough." "It will be," he said softly, "because this time I'm not going to stay quiet to protect my seat at the table." The board meeting was held in the Hawthorne Towers Executive Lounge. Glass walls, high ceilings, and cold coffee in porcelain cups. Vivian Ashford arrived first, polished, sharp, dressed in winter white like an angel with teeth. She greeted the others with gentle smiles and subtle gestures, the kind that suggested diplomacy but always drew blood. Edward entered next, alone. No coat, no briefcase, just presence. The room grew quiet. Then June walked in. She hadn't planned on attending. But after breakfast, toast shared in silence, Finn carefully cutting hers into heart shapes. Just in case you need some luck, she knew she couldn't let Edward stand there alone. She wore the scarf loosely draped around her shoulders, wrapped over a soft gray coat, head held high. The meeting opened with formalities. Then came the questions. Vivian stood. "Mr. Hawthorne, we understand you've been housing a former employee, one with a known familial connection to financial fraud. Do you consider this ethical, given your role as CEO?" Edward didn't flinch. "Yes, A murmur rippled across the room. He continued, voice steady. June Callahan, formerly Atwell, disclosed her past to me in full transparency. She was never convicted of anything. Her record is clean. Her work with us has been exemplary, Vivian pressed. Do you deny that personal feelings influenced your decisions? Edward paused. Then, for the first time, he spoke with emotion. I don't deny that she matters to me. The room froze. Edward turned to June. You matter to me, her breath caught. He turned back to the board. But my actions have never compromised this company. I help someone in need, someone who has more integrity than most people I've worked with. If that's a reason to remove me, then I'll leave today. A hush. Even Vivian blinked. One of the quieter board members, a woman named Carol, silver-haired with kind eyes, leaned forward. Ms. Callahan, she said, addressing June directly, may I ask why you didn't come forward sooner? June stood, straightened her scarf, and spoke clearly. Because I didn't want sympathy. I've spent the last 3 years proving that I'm not my father's mistakes, not in court, not in my son's eyes, not in your boardroom. She looked at Vivian. I didn't manipulate my way into anyone's house. I was left with nowhere to go. I stayed because your CEO saw a mother and a child, not a name. That should speak to his character, not mine. Silence. Then, softly, from the end of the table, Carol spoke again. I lost my father to scandal, too. Thank you for speaking today. They left together, Edward and June, neither saying anything until the elevator doors closed. Then June finally breathed. I didn't expect you to say it. That I matter. Edward looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. I've wanted to say it for a long time. Back at the guest house, Finn waited with Miss Ellie, June's sweet elderly neighbor, who'd offered to watch him for the afternoon. He ran to his mother, arms outstretched. Mama, I made us all Christmas cards, even Mr. Edward. Edward crouched and took the folded red paper. Inside was a drawing, a house with 3 stick figures, one tall, one with long hair, one small, holding a sword. Is that a toy soldier? Edward asked, smiling. No, Finn said seriously. That's you. You're the one guarding us now. That night, Vivian sat alone at a private bar. She stirred her martini, staring down at her phone. A message appeared. Unknown number. She's not done telling the truth, and neither am I. Vivian's hand paused mid-stir. Her face turned pale, because she recognized the number, and it didn't belong to Edward, it belonged to someone from June's past. That night, after Finn fell asleep tucked beside his fortress of stuffed animals and snowflake pajamas, June finally allowed herself to sit still. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed against her ears like snowfall, soft but suffocating. She sat on the guest house sofa, scarf curled loosely around her neck, cup of chamomile tea cooling in her hands. Edward had dropped it off with his usual knock and a gentle, "You held your own today. I just wanted to say that." She hadn't answered the door. She couldn't, not after what it had taken to stand in that room and reclaim her name. But even now, in the soft glow of the Christmas tree, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt exposed. She had stripped herself bare in front of the people who held her future and her son's in their hands. And now? All she could do was wait until a knock came again. But it wasn't Edward this time. It was a voice, low, muffled through the door. "June?" She froze. The teacup trembled in her hand. She knew that voice. No, it couldn't be. Not after all these years. She opened the door with her hand half raised, heart racing, and there he stood, Daniel Atwell, her brother, the ghost she had buried with her old name. His suit was cheaper than she remembered. His once charming smile had edges now, and his eyes, the same blue-gray as Finn's, were hollowed out by something she couldn't name. "Hi, Junebug," he said softly, using the nickname only he had ever dared to use. She didn't move, didn't speak. He sighed. I got your address from Vivian. She said you'd finally stepped into the light again. She blinked slowly. I don't know what that means. Daniel shifted. It means you made it. You landed on your feet. Figured you'd be in a corner somewhere with a kid on your hip and a job cleaning office floors. Not this. He gestured at the guest house. Warm lights, Christmas tree, safety. You shouldn't be here, she said finally. Relax, he said, lifting his hands. I'm not here to ruin anything. Then why are you here? He leaned against the doorframe. To tell you that Dad's case is reopening. Appeals court. June's body went cold. No, it's done. It was sealed. He's serving time. Not anymore, Daniel said. He's sick. They want to revisit the sentencing. He's using your name, your story, playing the estranged daughter wronged by the media card. June backed up a step, hand gripping the doorframe. And you're helping him? She asked, voice sharp. Daniel's jaw twitched. I'm helping us. If they reduce his sentence, maybe some of the assets get unfrozen. You wouldn't have to depend on charity from your boss. The slap was soft, almost soundless. She didn't even realize she'd raised her hand until it landed. Daniel flinched. I'm not dependent, she said through clenched teeth, and that man is more family than our father ever was. He touched his jaw, staring at her with something like disbelief. Wow, you've changed. No, she whispered. I just stopped apologizing. She closed the door and locked it, and her hand shook as she pressed her forehead against the wood. The past hadn't just knocked, it had found her, and now it was trying to rewrite the story she'd fought to own. Later, as the tears finally dried and she wrapped herself tighter in her scarf, Finn stirred from the other room. She tucked him back in, gently brushing a curl from his forehead. Is Mr. Edward coming tomorrow? He mumbled. She smiled. I think so. Good, he said sleepily. He makes you less sad. Her heart cracked a little. She kissed his temple. He makes me feel safe. The next morning, June walked up to the main house. No hesitation. No scarf to hide behind. Edward opened the door before she could knock. I was going to come to you, he said. She shook her head. I need to talk. He stepped aside. They sat in the sunroom, the one with wide windows and a view of the frozen lake. She told him everything, her brother, her father. The appeal, the fear. Edward didn't interrupt once. When she finished, her voice low and exhausted, he sat forward. We'll get ahead of it. June stared at him. We? You're not alone in this anymore. Her eyes filled. You can't keep protecting me, Edward. You'll lose everything. He leaned closer. Then let me lose it for something that matters. Across town, Vivian poured herself a drink and opened her laptop. A new file had arrived, from Daniel Atwell, labeled Photos, June and Hawthorne, unreleased. Inside was one photo, June, on Edward's porch, holding his scarf, smiling. Snow fell harder that evening. Thicker now, noiseless and heavy, blanketing everything in white. It looked peaceful, but peace is only ever a disguise when the storm is still coming. June stood at the window of the guest house, arms wrapped around herself, watching flakes swirl past the glass like they had somewhere more important to be. Edward had offered to bring dinner again. She'd said no this time, politely but firmly. She needed space to think, to breathe, because one photo, one perfectly timed photo, was already spreading like wildfire. It hadn't gone viral yet, but inside the right corporate inboxes, whispered between boardroom doors and assistant group chats, the image of June Atwell, smiling with Edward Hawthorne on his private porch, wrapped in his scarf, had been forwarded with captions like, "So much for just an assistant. He's falling for her, isn't he?" This is how the mighty lose their thrones. June didn't care about gossip. She cared about Finn, and about the thin line Edward walked every day, balancing dignity and power while protecting a company full of people depending on his name. She cared about what it meant for him to be seen as weak, and she cared, more than she dared admit, about how her presence might be the thing pushing him off the edge. Finn was in bed early that night. He was tired after a day of baking cookies with Miss Ellie, who'd come by with a tin full of cinnamon hearts and stories about her late husband's terrible dance moves. He kissed June's cheek sleepily before bed. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "Are we safe now?" She paused, brushed his hair back. "We're safe tonight." She didn't plan on seeing Edward again that night. But he came anyway, just after 9, knocked once. She opened the door slowly, already speaking. "Edward, I just need a few days to—" He didn't let her finish. "I'm calling a press conference." June froze. "What?" "I'm telling the truth, the full truth, publicly, before Vivian spins it into something worse." Her heart dropped. "You can't." "I can," he said, "and I will." He stepped into the living room, took off his gloves, and turned to face her fully. "I have spent years letting other people control the story. My silence was always safer, more profitable. But that silence never kept me warm. It didn't give me a home or a reason to look forward to anything." His voice softened. "You and Finn, you've given me something real, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise." June swallowed hard. "This could cost you everything." Edward stepped closer. "Then let me make the choice, June. Just once, let me choose you." She didn't kiss him, but she didn't back away either. Instead, she took his hand, slowly, like she was still afraid it might disappear. "I don't need a press conference," she whispered. "I just need to stop hiding." His eyes searched hers. "Then come with me." The next morning, Edward didn't step up to a podium. He didn't wear a suit or read from a carefully worded script. He sat down in his office, turned on a camera, and spoke directly, not to investors or shareholders, but to people. Edward Hawthorne, statement, livestream excerpt. "This holiday season, I invited a woman and her child into my home after they were left without one. Her name is June. You've seen her name passed around, twisted, repackaged, used as a weapon. But what you haven't seen is the strength it takes to start over after your name has been dragged through the courtrooms and headlines. She's not a scandal. She's a mother, a brilliant employee, and someone I care for deeply. If my association with her offends you, I accept that. If it disqualifies me from this position, so be it. But I will not apologize for choosing kindness over optics. For once, let's reward dignity instead of punishing it." By noon, the internet was on fire, and not the kind of fire Edward's enemies had hoped for. Thousands of comments poured in. "Finally, a CEO with a heart. Not a scandal, a man doing the right thing. Where can I send June and Finn a proper Christmas meal? I trust this guy with my pension and my daughter." Even news anchors struggled to frame it. Instead of running the photo, most ran the quote. "She's not a scandal, she's a mother." Vivian watched it all unfold from her penthouse. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel Atwell, calling again. She silenced it, because somewhere deep in her spine she felt it, the unraveling. This wasn't a fall. This was Edward rising, not despite the storm, but because he'd faced it. And she had underestimated who he was when no one was watching. Back at the guest house, June stood outside with Finn watching flakes fall, as the city quietly forgave her. "I don't understand," he said, tugging on her coat. "Why are people being nice now?" June smiled. "Because someone told the truth before the lies could spread." Finn looked up at her. "Like a soldier?" She nodded. "Just like one." That night, as they sat by the fireplace, Edward joined them. No grand gesture, no speech. He just brought soup, potato, and leek, June's favorite. Finn grinned when he saw it. "Mama says that's your love language. Soup." Edward chuckled. She's not wrong. They ate together, quiet, warm, whole. After dinner, June walked him to the door. Neither of them rushed the goodbye. She looked up at him, heart beating slower now, finally free of the fear. "You said you chose me." Edward reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something small, a key. "To the guest house?" she asked. "No," he said. "To the front door." June's breath caught. "This isn't a miracle, June. This is a choice. One I'll keep making. Tomorrow, next year, every quiet morning. Every loud one, too." She didn't speak, just stepped forward and laid her forehead gently against his. And for the first time, she didn't flinch from being loved, but not far away. Daniel Atwell packed a duffel bag, jaw clenched. A reporter had called, said his name was going public next. He threw his phone across the room. Because now, he was the scandal, and the only one left who might still speak to him was the sister he'd already betrayed. 3 days before New Year's, the snow finally stopped. The city stretched out in shades of soft gray and fading gold, rooftops lined with old frost and hopeful sunlight. June stood in the kitchen of the guest house, watching Finn peel the last clementine from the bowl Edward had brought the night before. They'd slipped into something dangerously close to life, not fantasy, not survival, but living. Each day since Edward's public statement, more support had come in, messages from strangers, neighbors leaving handwritten notes, even former co-workers who had once avoided June in the break room now reached out to apologize. She hadn't forgiven the world, but she had started to trust it again, and yet, just when the dust began to settle, the knock came, not sharp, not angry, just familiar. She opened the door slowly. Daniel Atwell stood there again, but this time he looked smaller, not physically, but worn down in a way no expensive suit could fix. He didn't speak right away, just held out a manila envelope. "What's that?" June asked. "Everything," he said quietly. "Everything I tried to sell." She stared at it, but didn't take it. He continued, voice flat. "Vivian stopped returning my calls. The reporter went cold, and Dad's team dropped the appeal. They don't want my name attached anymore. I'm toxic again." June crossed her arms. "And you think I'm going to save you?" "No," he said. "I think you deserve an apology, and I don't know how to give one unless I say it with everything in my hands." She looked at the envelope, then at him. "You gave up your family to chase power," she said. "Now you're here because it left you behind." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "I just wanted to matter." "You did," she said quietly. "To me, to Finn. You were his uncle before you became a headline." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to be that again." June stepped back. "Then maybe you should start by asking to come in." They sat at the small kitchen table. Finn stayed in his room. Miss Ellie had taken him to build snow lanterns in her yard, and June made tea the way their mother used to. Lemon, not milk, just a hint of honey. Daniel barely looked up. "Do you still wear the scarf?" he asked after a while. She touched it instinctively. "You gave it to me," she said, "the night she died." He nodded. "I thought it would keep you safe. You were shaking." "I'm still shaking," she admitted, "but I've stopped hiding." Daniel opened the envelope. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, even drafts of messages he'd never sent. To reporters, to Edward's competitors, to a media firm offering him money for dirt. He pushed it toward her. "I want to give you the right to burn this, or hand it over, whatever restores your peace." She stared at the papers and didn't take them. "Keep it," she said. "Let it remind you who you could have become, and who you still might be. If you stop now." It wasn't forgiveness. It was the beginning of distance, done honestly. He looked at her, eyes misted. "I don't deserve that kind of forgiveness," she shrugged gently. "Neither did I, but someone gave it to me anyway." That night, Edward met her by the fireplace. He didn't ask how the visit went. He didn't need to. She handed him a slip of paper with an address, Daniel's temporary hotel. "He's not staying long, but he's not running anymore either," Edward nodded. "Good." They sat in silence for a while, watching Finn fall asleep beside a stack of picture books, one hand still wrapped around the wooden soldier. "Do you ever regret it?" June asked softly. "Regret what?" "Not chasing power when you could have had more of it. Not protecting the company's image instead of me." Edward turned to her, his expression steady. "June, I was raised in a house where power made people cold. I've spent years trying to be warm anyway. Choosing you wasn't the end of my strength. It was the beginning of it." Her throat tightened. "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Then don't." She stood to leave the room, but he caught her hand gently. "Wait." She turned. Edward reached into his coat pocket again. But this time, there was no key, no speech, just a small velvet ring box. June froze, her breath caught. He opened it slowly, not with show but reverence. Inside was a ring unlike any she'd ever worn, simple, elegant, a warm-toned band with a delicate sapphire in the center, not new, but loved. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She wore it until the day she died. She used to say, if it's real love, it should live past us." June's eyes blurred. "Edward, I'm not asking you for a wedding tomorrow or next month. I'm not asking you to forget the pain or to pretend we had a normal beginning." He stepped closer. "I'm asking if you'll let this be your second chance." "And mine." June pressed her hand to her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I need time," she whispered. "Not because I don't love you, but because I do, and I want to walk into this without fear." Edward smiled. Soft, sure. "Then I'll wait, as long as it takes." The next morning, Finn ran into the kitchen, clutching the toy soldier. "Mama," he called out, "he's not guarding alone anymore." June knelt. "What do you mean?" Finn turned the toy in his hand, and in the other, a second soldier. Edward had quietly placed it there overnight. Two little warriors, side by side. December 31st came quietly, no big parties, no ballrooms, just soft snow, a crackling fireplace, and the slow pulse of a year that had changed everything. Edward stood in the kitchen of the guest house, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled, not by wind, but by Finn's earlier attempt to style it like a knight. "Mashed potatoes," Edward said solemnly. "Require patience." Finn, standing on a stool beside him, held a potato masher like a sword. "Can I do the next one?" Edward passed it over with a nod. "Carefully, Commander." June watched from the doorway, arms crossed, lips curved. She wore a soft green sweater, her mother's scarf wrapped loose around her shoulders. She hadn't taken it off in days, not because she needed to hide, but because it finally felt like home. Dinner was simple. Roasted chicken, potatoes, roasted carrots with honey glaze. The same recipe her mother used to make. Edward had found it in a notebook June had forgotten in a kitchen drawer. He didn't say anything, just left the folded page on the counter with a note. Thought it should be cooked again. They ate slowly, together. The kind of meal that didn't need background noise, just warmth, shared glances, laughter. Halfway through dessert, cinnamon bread pudding, Finn stood suddenly, arms raised. "I want to make a toast." June blinked, smiling. "Okay, sweetie, go ahead." Finn climbed onto his chair, held up a plastic cup of milk, and declared, to Mr. Edward, who didn't run away, even when the big people got loud. Edward raised his glass. "To Finn, the bravest soldier of all." They clinked cups. Milk, wine, and heart. After Finn was tucked in, stuffed animals all aligned for their midnight guard shift, June stepped out onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself as she watched the stars stretch across the cold night sky. Edward joined her in silence, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one without a word. "I never liked New Year's Eve," she said softly. "It always felt like pressure to be someone different, someone better." He looked at her. "And this year?" She glanced over. "This year, I just want to be present." He nodded. "You already are." They stood there together, the snow still falling, not enough to bury, just enough to soften the edges. "Have you thought about it?" he asked after a while. "The ring? The future?" "I have," she said, meeting his gaze, "and I know I'm not ready for a big promise yet." Edward didn't flinch. "But," she added, pulling something from her pocket, "I am ready for this." She held out a tiny paper star, folded from the old envelope Daniel had left behind. A symbol, not of the past, but of what she'd chosen to make from it. Edward took it gently, his thumb brushing hers. "I'd take this over a yes if it means you're walking beside me." She smiled. "I am." Earlier that day, in an unexpected twist, Vivian Ashford made a statement, short, unapologetic, but revealing. "It has become clear that some of my previous judgments were clouded by personal history. While I maintain my commitment to this board's integrity, I support Mr. Hawthorne's continued leadership and the company's direction." In other words, she backed down. The whispers stopped. The pressure shifted. Because what do you do when someone owns their truth? You stop trying to weaponize it. January 1st came with gold light and quiet joy. Finn ran barefoot across the hardwood floors, chasing the sunlight like it was a game. June poured coffee into 2 mugs. "He wants pancakes." Edward raised a brow. "Again?" "He said it's a New Year tradition," Edward chuckled. Who am I to argue with tradition? They cooked together, flipping pancakes, dancing to old songs on the radio. Finn giggled as Edward tried to moonwalk in socks, and somewhere between syrup and second servings, the scarf slipped from June's shoulders onto the back of a chair, unnoticed. She didn't pick it up right away, because, for the first time, she didn't need to carry her protection with her. She had it here, in this house, in this love, in herself. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, from a woman June didn't know. She opened it slowly. "Dear June, you don't know me, you don't. But I saw your story. I, too, changed my name years ago after my brother got involved in something terrible. I lost my job, my friends, my voice. But hearing you speak, hearing what Edward said about you, gave me something I thought I'd never feel again. Hope. Thank you for not hiding. You made space for the rest of us to breathe." With gratitude, Melanie June held the letter to her chest for a long time, then quietly walked to the mantel. Next to the wooden toy soldier sat the ring box. She didn't open it, but she placed the letter beside it, 2 pieces of her future side by side. That night, Edward tucked Finn into bed. Not because he had to, but because Finn asked. As he turned to leave, Finn whispered, "Are you going to marry my mom someday?" Edward paused, then smiled. "Only if she says yes, and only when she's ready." Finn nodded sagely. "Okay, but I think she will." As the last firelight dimmed and the snow settled into sleep, June stood at the bedroom window watching stars blink over the city. She wore a soft nightgown, no scarf, no fear. Edward came up behind her, resting his chin gently on her shoulder. Neither spoke. Because some chapters don't end with words, they end with peace. 1 year later, the scarf still lived in the house, folded and kept with care, folded now, framed actually. In a glass shadow box Edward had commissioned quietly, placing it in the entry hall of the home they had rebuilt together. Below it, on a small brass plaque, were 5 simple words, "What we carry makes us." June had cried when he gave it to her. Gave, not because it was grand, but because he understood. All of it, the memory, the grief, the strength it took to wear something that once shielded her, and now honored the journey she no longer had to make alone. It was early spring now, though the mountains still wore snow at their edges. The world had softened since that first Christmas Eve. Things weren't perfect. June still worked part-time while adjusting to consulting on internal ethics, a role she'd earned, not been gifted, and Edward remained CEO, but with clearer eyes and firmer boundaries. Vivian had resigned from the board in April, not under pressure, but by choice. Her parting note, sent only to Edward, had been brief. "You were right to protect her. I just wasn't brave enough to protect anyone once, not even myself." It was the closest she would come to an apology. That was enough. Finn had grown taller, louder, sillier. He still clutched the original wooden soldier at night, though now it had a companion. Courtesy of Edward, and the two were married according to Finn's new understanding of the world. Soldiers can get married too, Mama, even if they're both plastic. June had agreed, laughing through tears. He'd made her brave, that boy. And Edward? He'd made her believe, not in fairy tales, but in second chances. The kind you build, brick by brick, word by word. And now? It was Christmas Eve again. The house was warm, filled with the smell of orange clove, cinnamon rolls, and fir needles. Snow fell gently outside, not a storm this time, just a memory repeating itself. The living room was quiet. Finn had just gone to bed. Wearing his little red pajama set with golden buttons, a miniature nutcracker uniform Edward had picked out weeks ago. A plate of cookies waited for Santa, along with a small note in Finn's crooked handwriting. "Please bring Mama more courage. She doesn't need much, but just a little is nice." Edward read it and smiled. "You've already given her that," he whispered. June stood near the fireplace, holding a mug of warm cider. She wore a soft winter white sweater and a long skirt that brushed her ankles, her hair loose around her shoulders. Edward approached, wrapping his arms gently around her waist from behind. "Last Christmas," he murmured, "you were standing in a lobby with nowhere to go." "I remember," she said, "and you said something strange." "Pretend I'm your family," he recited, "just for tonight." June turned, eyes shining. "You stopped pretending before I did." Edward leaned in, his forehead against hers. "I never pretended. I just didn't know if I was allowed to feel that much." June smiled. "You were. You are." Finn's voice drifted from upstairs. "Is this the part where you propose?" They both burst out laughing. Edward called back, "Finn, we talked about this." June grinned, cheeks flushed. "You told him." "I might have said there'd be a surprise." She raised an eyebrow. "You mean the surprise?" He reached into his coat pocket. Not a ring this time, but a small silver key. "I had the house redone while you were consulting in the city," he said. "It's ours now. Not mine, not yours. Ours." June stared at it, then up at him. Edward's voice softened. "Marry me when you're ready." "However you want, or not at all. I don't care about the formality. I just want you to wake up in this house every morning knowing that every single door is open to you, that you're safe here, chosen." She took the key with shaking hands, and then she whispered something she hadn't said to anyone in years. "I do." 1 week later. It wasn't a wedding, not quite. Just them, Finn, Miss Ellie, a few close friends, a quiet gathering in the backyard under twinkling lights and snow-dusted branches. June wore a cream coat. Edward wore a charcoal suit with no tie. They exchanged vows, handwritten and a little messy. And in place of a ring, June slipped the scarf from the frame, wrapped it around both their hands and whispered, "This is where I carried my past. Now I carry you." By the following Christmas, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to Mrs. June Callahan Hawthorne. She opened it with a raised eyebrow. Edward, reading over her shoulder. "Dear June, you don't know me, but I was Daniel Atwell's parole officer. I thought you'd want to know that he's volunteering at a financial literacy program in Boston. He talks about his sister all the time. The one who didn't burn the letters, didn't bury the truth, and didn't shut the door when she had every right to. I think you saved more than your own story." June folded the letters slowly, her heart full. She turned to Edward. "Do you think people ever really change?" Edward smiled. "I think they do, when someone believes they can." That night, Edward stood by Finn's bedroom door. watching the boy sleep, both toy soldiers placed carefully beside him. June joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Next Christmas," she whispered, "I think we'll need more stockings." Edward blinked, turned to her. She smiled, not big, just soft, but full. "Are you saying—" She nodded. "I haven't told Finn yet." "I wanted to tell you first." Edward closed his eyes, pulling her into a hug that said everything words couldn't. Outside, the snow began again, but inside, there was only light. The end. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who doesn't look away, one quiet act of kindness on a snowy night, and one whispered offer. Pretend I'm your family, because sometimes pretending is how the real thing begins. What would you have done if you were in June's place? Would you have trusted Edward or walked away? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear how you would have ended this story. Rate this love story from 0 to 10, and if you'd like more like it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the next chapter of Unforgettable Stories. Until next time, I'll see you in the next story.